All right, so sanding. Okay, so here's the thing with metals, guys, is that every step that you do has to go in order. So you cut out your project first. After you cut it out, then you saw it out. After you saw it out, you file it. After you file your edges, and then you sand. After you sand, then you polish. You can't sand before you file, and you can't file before you cut it out. So all of these steps have to happen in this order. With the sandpaper, there's 3 different kinds of sandpaper that we're going to be using. We're going to be using 320 grit sandpaper, 400 grit sandpaper, and 600 grit sandpaper in that order. So if you notice, those numbers went up, okay? So the smaller the number on the sandpaper, the coarser the paper is. So we're going to start with the roughest paper first, and then as we go through it, we're going to go up to the finer ones. And then what you'll find is that your piece will kind of look more shiny the more that you progress through those different sandpapers. So, how do you sand? Okay. Now I've got all these steps on the handout that's in that packet at your tables. I also will have it up on the Epson so you guys can see it. You guys are going to get a little square of sandpaper like this. This is not the only paper you're going to need. In fact, with the 320 grit sandpaper, you're going to use a lot of it, because this is the only sandpaper that will take away all your file marks and will take away all your scratches. 400 and 600 will not do that, okay? So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to sand your edges first, okay? So sand your edges first, and then we will sand the surface, okay? We're going to show you guys how to make a little sanding stick. So what I do, first thing I do is I take the little sheet of sandpaper and I cut it in half. And you can do this by just kind of folding it back and forth. And then I just kind of use the edge of a table to kind of just cut it like that. So now I've got 2 pieces. So then what you're going to do is you're going to take a popsicle stick and you are going to wrap that very tightly around the stick. So wrap it around tight, okay? So that way it's not loose and just falls off. So I'm just going to tightly roll that up. And then I'm going to use a piece of masking tape to just basically tape it at the end so it doesn't unravel. If I can get the masking tape to work. There we go. And when I put this tape on here, I just put it on so I'm just covering the very bottom of that. I don't want to cover up a ton of that sandpaper because I want to use it, okay? So then it looks like this. When you sand your edges, you don't have to concern yourself with which way you're sanding, okay? So you can go back and forth and you can go down and up and down in any direction you want to. You do have to remember that you beveled your edges, so because of that, you want to make sure that you are putting that sandpaper right up on that rounded corner now so that you can remove the file marks off of that, okay? So you want to make sure you get that. You are going to sand until you do not see any more file marks anymore. And the way to test that out is just to hold it up to the light, and if you see any little like hatching marks or just a lot of lines going in one direction, those are file marks that need to come out. So the answer is always going to be just more sanding, okay? A lot of times when kids are showing me their projects when they're sanding, they'll come up and tell me, I can't get that scratch out, I can't get that file mark out. The answer is you can, you just need to sand more, okay? So it's always a possibility. So don't ever come up to me and say you can't, because you can't. So you just keep doing that. Now what you will notice is that as you sand, the sandpaper will lose its grit, and then therefore it's losing its power to take away those file marks. So when this starts to wear down, all you have to do is just rip off that top layer, and then you've got new sandpaper underneath. You'll use it until it's gone, okay? You will also use this sanding stick for the inside of your shapes, okay? And if you have any really tight, like if you guys notice, I can't get down here into this part with this sanding stick, a little trick is to actually take some of your sandpaper that you have remaining and just roll it up on itself a few times. So without the popsicle stick underneath it, didn't rip out so nice. And then again, take some masking tape and just tape the bottom so it doesn't unravel, and just use it like this. And sand again until it's all gone, okay? So that's how you do that. Now, after all your edges are sanded, if you think that they're all sanded and they look good, let me see it. If I say that you're good, then you're ready to start sanding the surface. Now, to start sanding the surface, there's less freedom in how you can do this part, okay? I highly recommend that when you start sanding the surface, that you just sand in one small section, okay? So don't try to sand the whole piece all at once, because what happens a lot of times, if you just do this, you stop paying attention to what you're doing, and you don't tend to do as good of a job. If you focus on one small section, you'll be able to kind of keep your eye on what you're doing, and you'll be able to monitor if you actually have that section done. You'll be much more detailed and thorough that way. When you sand, if you guys notice, I was going back and forth, but you have to make sure you always keep your sanding lines going in one direction. So what does that mean? That means I can't sand in this direction one day and then come in here the next day and go like this, because then I'm crossing over my sanding lines. If you cross over your sanding lines, you're going to create more of a matte finish than a high polish finish, okay? And our goal in here is to get that high polish finish, okay? The other thing is too is that if you cross over your lines, crossing them over, you'll actually expose them more. So you'll actually see lines going on top of your project. Our goal at the end of this is not to see any lines at all. So here's the thing, if you have a scratch in your surface, and most likely those were put on from your files, you are literally sanding down the surface of your metal to the lowest point of that scratch until it's gone. So that's what you have to do. So all of the steps that we've done, sawing, filing, sanding, is actually all about removing the metal. And then what you should have left is a piece that's really nice and smooth, has no scratches, and has a high polished finish. So you should see that. And a lot of times when I look at this to test if I'm good to go into another section, which I see a scratch right there, you're looking at any line that's not going in the direction of your sanding lines is a scratch that has to come out, okay? And again, it's all about how much sanding you're willing to do. So don't come up to me and say I can't get this out, because you can. You just have to be willing to sand a lot, okay? So that's how you do that. Now, if you guys noticed, I did this all on a piece of paper towel. I don't want to put it on the table, because if I do, I'm probably going to scratch the surface of the table. The other thing too that's nice about this, if you guys look on this, you see all that sand that's come off of here? I don't want to keep that all there, because again, if I put that on top of there, it's going to scratch here. I take this off, I shake it off every once in a while to get that stuff off, and then I go back to work, okay? So sand on top of a piece of paper towel. There you go. That's